Does Max race Oscar differently than he races Lando?
100%. Yes,
in what way?
unquestionably.
In what way?
Something about Oscar makes Max change his entire approach. Check this video out.
I think he knows. He knows that there's something a bit more Street Fighter about Oscar Piastri, and he saw it, in Jeddah. I think Max knows he's got a different animal when Oscar's in his mirrors, not by much than Lando, just positioning of the car. There's a decisiveness about what he did that. But you can't criticize Lando's racecraft, because the way he passed the Mercedes and eventually passed Max was just top draw, in particular. But somehow, I have absolutely no doubt that, and just words he says as well, that Max realizes Oscar's a different deal in wheel-to-wheel combat.
I think the big thing is when you look at the last few races, the turn ones have really stood out. Piastri arguably lost out a lot this week in turn one, lost several positions. And then Piastri seems very sure, if you want it for a better word, of the line he's going to take, where he's going to position the car, how he's going to try and stand his ground through turn one. And that must be very interesting as a driver on the grid, looking down into turn one with the people that you have around you, Martin, in terms of how much you're going to give or push in that. I can't even imagine being in that situation.
Oscar may have pulled off a clever maneuver, but look closer. Max executed the team's defensive plan exactly. That dirty inside line, a calculated gamble. These aren't mistakes, they're margins. And Max is still the benchmark. Piastri did well, but to beat Max consistently, you need more than one perfect moment. You need perfection over a season.
Yeah, for example, Piastri's overtake on Verstappen was set up for several corners, wasn't it? He'd worked it out over the laps. He followed him, and then it was lap 14 when he eventually got past. And he basically ended up forcing Max, and Max had even been told by GP Lambiese's engineer, stay to the inside. Max did that. And then Oscar, just dollied him up a treat. Max is tight into turn one on the dirty line, has to brake late. Oscar saw it all unfolding, actually had to turn left a little bit. He realized that Max was going to slide and was going to brake. And that's sort of driving somebody else's car at the same time as driving your own car. That's what we're talking about here. If you want, he just had a little jink left, ducked underneath, and disappeared. And that was all one big cunning plan that came to fruition nicely.
The way Max committed to that inside line, despite knowing it was dirty, shows his trust in the car and himself. Oscar executed brilliantly, no doubt, but this was a rare moment where Verstappen's defense was more about strategic compliance than raw combat. And that makes it even more fascinating. Max is now racing with the championship mindset every lap.
To me, to add to that, it's a split-second decision, isn't it? But also perhaps being unluckily in the wrong place on the outside at turn two on that first lap. But then the time that it took to clear him comparatively, yes, it was relatively same in terms of laps, but he did lose 6 or 7 seconds, didn't he, in trying to get past Max as opposed to Oscar, Martin. And I wonder, going forward, for Lando himself, we talk about the racecraft, and you said it's fine the way his racecraft's fine, been passing slower cars, but when it comes down to it in wheel-to-wheel combat, if that's to happen more often with himself and Piastri and Max going forward to the end of the season, do you think it's going to be a case this year of Oscar just having the edge on racecraft and wheel-to-wheel combat, and Lando just being slightly quicker? And if Lando can get his head right, maybe that can take care of it. But what advice would you give to Lando about changing that or catching Oscar up on that front?
I think it's too early to critique anybody, really. And what I do know from history is that when drivers are up for a world championship, they step their game up. They find an overdrive gear. We've seen it over the years, over the decades, when they just take off and they just improve every aspect of what they're doing. And, I don't Lando in the main race, I mean, Max has gone into the first corner, locked the front axle, starting to run wide. Lando's tucked underneath him, tracks, clear ahead of him, hacks on his tail, and he hit the throttle. And because it looked, if he had gone steaming around the outside of turn 2, it looked genius for Lando. And then Max had a slide. Max's problems in turns 1 and 2 cost Lando the Grand Prix, as far as I'm concerned. So, but you can't say Lando should have done anything other than hit the throttle to go. I mean, it looked like an overtaking opportunity. But I think they will both address all and every any issues that they have where they need to improve, and just they'll both raise their gains. But I don't know, there's just something in the way. Lando's not quite as decisive how he places the car when he's overtaking, I don't think. And he'll learn from that. But the way he went past, was it George? Was extraordinary. Actually, a really unorthodox overtaking place. But to answer your question, yes, I think that's exactly where they are. But I wouldn't say that's going to stay like that for the rest of the season.
Isn't that the challenge of modern F1? It's not just raw pace, it's timing under pressure. Lando has the speed, no doubt, but against someone like Max, who forces split-second decisions, you need razor-sharp instincts. Could it be that Oscar's background in karting and junior series has given him that edge in wheel-to-wheel scenarios?
Let's not forget, of course, guys, that it wasn't the perfect Saturday for Oscar. I only realized this really when Oscar was talking about the silly dance, the griddy, and he was saying he wasn't expecting to do it, hadn't practiced it, because having made that mistake, which I think I said on Saturday's notebook, was the first in qualifying, that was the first big, I can see that's a mistake from Oscar since the Australia off and the slow reverse, wasn't it? I think that mistake of Oscar's in qualifying, I can't think of a mistake he's made since then. So that only being fourth was a mistake, and he recovered. He didn't expect to win the Grand Prix, did he, Bernie? I mean, after that, he said I wasn't expecting from fourth to win the Grand Prix, so I hadn't practiced the dance. But what a recovery.
Well, maybe he's practicing the dance this week. Maybe we should all have a go at practicing this week. But I think that, yes, he did make a mistake in qualifying, and that did lead him to the position he was in the track or on the grid, and therefore where he thought he was going to finish the race. But that's unusual from Oscar, because I think if anything over the races we've had so far, it's been Lando making these little mistakes in qualifying, not getting the lap together, not quite getting the McLaren the position on the grid it should be. And back to sort of Simon's point a minute ago about if one's a bit better in absolute pace, one's a bit better in racecraft, what's going to make the difference? And I think being ahead, we've seen how important qualifying is on a lot of tracks so far this year, and whoever can tidy up those little things. Yes, it was Oscar this week, but there's been quite a few weeks where it's been Lando. Tidy up, get the best out of the car, be ahead of Max Verstappen, not have to do the overtakes. That's going to be crucial as the year goes on and cars find their performance through it.
What separates a title contender from a world champion isn't just talent, it's precision under pressure. It's how often you don't need to recover. And that's where Max Verstappen still has the edge. He doesn't give away time on Saturdays. He rarely makes those little mistakes that force a recovery drive on Sunday. That's why he controls the pace, the narrative, and more often than not, the top step of the podium. Oscar Piastri's ability to bounce back this weekend was impressive, no question. From a qualifying error to a Grand Prix win, he showed resilience, race IQ, and a level of calm we don't often see in someone still this early in their F1 career. That's the sign of a driver maturing fast. But here's the reality. Over a 24-race season, recovery drives alone don't win championships. You can't afford to be brilliant on Sunday if you're starting 3 or 4 places behind on Saturday. That's where Oscar and Lando still need to evolve. Qualifying isn't just a grid position. It's strategy, control, and the ability to dictate terms to someone like Verstappen. So yes, this weekend, Oscar reminded us he's a serious player. But if he wants to dethrone the reigning king, he needs to do more than recover. He needs to eliminate the need to recover. That's the level Verstappen is on, and that's the level anyone who wants this title will have to reach.